And this is Dr. Mike Eades for the Adapt for Life program, and I'm going to give a little talk today, a brief dissertation on protein as it applies to low carb dieting. Hope everyone's doing fine, and good morning or good afternoon or good evening wherever you are in the world. It's about 10 o'clock in the morning for me on the west coast of the USA. So let's talk a bit about protein. Protein, as I'm sure you all know, is a macronutrient. It's one of three. You've got proteins, you've got carbs, and you've got fat. And protein, of all three of the macronutrients, is doubtlessly the most essential. I mean, fat is essential too, but not to the same degree that protein is. The protein, if you don't get that, you die. And you die fairly quickly of protein malnutrition. Now, people have fasted for long periods of time, but they were hugely obese when they did this, most of them, and they were able to survive without protein. But your average weight individual is not going to be able to do that. Anyway, protein to that extent is essential to life. And as I say, fat's essential as well, but not to the same extent as protein, as you can go a lot longer without fat without creating a serious problem than you can with protein. And carb, I mean, you can go forever without carb without creating a serious problem. So carb is totally inessential. So where do we get protein? We get it from our food mainly. We can get it from supplements too. We get about 6 or 7 ounces of protein, 6 or 7 grams of protein per ounce of meat. Probably get 6 grams of protein in an egg. There's this factor called the biological value of protein that is a function of how much protein is absorbed by the animal or person eating it compared to how much protein is in whatever the food is that's being eaten. And about the highest biological value protein you can get is whey protein, and it's at about 96%. Human milk is pretty high. It's at 94, 95%, and eggs about 94%. Beef is down at 75%. Now, strangely enough, a whole soybean is pretty high. It's up in the 90%, but you have to eat the whole soybean to get it. Anyway, that's the biological value of protein. For the most part, plants don't have as great a biological value as animal proteins do. And a lot of studies seem to reflect this. I mean, there have been studies on bone density, and a lot of people think bone is only built out of calcium, but bone has a protein sort of infrastructure that the calcium goes around. And studies have shown that people that eat animal protein tend to have stronger bones and greater bone density than people who eat plant protein. And the same thing actually with building muscle. Animal protein seems to do a better job of that than does plant protein. So what's the big deal with protein? Why do we need it? We need it because we have a continuous turnover in the body of protein all the time. We have about 200 grams a day of protein that turns over in the body. And these proteins that turn over, proteins are made of amino acids. The amino acids are split apart from the protein. Then the amino acids are what's called deaminated, the nitrogen parts removed from them, so there's just a carbon skeleton left. And the carbon skeleton then can be recycled and converted into other proteins, converted into actually glucose, although it doesn't do that very much, and can be burned directly, just like glucose can. So we're constantly shedding protein. We shed it in our skin. When we slough skin, we shed it in hair, we shed it when our nails grow, we shed it in secretions within the body, we shed it in GI juices that are a lot of GI enzymes that are made of protein. So we're constantly shedding protein, and we need to replace that protein. And it looks like that when you really look at it, there's not a lot of protein wasted in a day, 6, 8, 10 grams maybe, but you really need about a minimum of 35 to 45 grams of high quality protein a day just to maintain your lean body mass if you're a normal sized person. Now, that doesn't include if you're growing, if you're a kid, you need more. Strangely enough, if you're elderly, you need more. And it's a function of body size. If you're larger, you're going to need more, obviously, and your activity level. If you're very active, you're going to need more. So that's why we need protein, basically to replace and rebuild our lean body mass and our protein-dependent body structures. Now, we typically eat a lot more than 35 to 45 grams of protein a day. I probably eat, I don't know, 80, 90, 100 grams of protein a day. So what happens to the extra protein that you do eat above and beyond the 35 to 45 grams that you absolutely need for rebuilding and maintaining body structures? Well, a couple things happen to it. Number one, it can stay in the amino acid pool. Remember, the protein's broken down into its individual amino acids, and then these amino acids are kind of in a pool in the blood so that the body can pick them as it needs to repair itself. They can be, these amino acid skeletons can be actually converted into glucose and stored as glycogen. It can be converted into glucose and burned, and it can be burned directly as the amino acid skeletons. Now, this burning of amino acids or converting to glucose is an energy using process. So it's not like glucose that can be burned immediately, or it's not like fat that can pretty much be burned immediately. Protein has got to be altered, so that requires the input of energy to take place, and so that makes protein more what we call thermogenic. In other words, it throws off heat, and since it requires calories to burn the protein itself that are not required for glucose and fat, protein intake will actually help with weight loss, and many studies have shown this. If you substitute fat for protein, you're going to burn more calories to do that, and you're going to lose weight more quickly. And that's been shown in a host of studies. If you trade protein for fat, you actually lose weight a little bit more quickly. And so protein stimulates satiety. That's another one of its good things. And when it stimulates satiety, it makes you full faster, so you actually decrease your food intake. And in the elderly, you can actually drive an increase in their lean body mass from giving them extra protein. And why that is, I don't really know. I would suspect it's because most elderly are probably protein malnourished a little bit, because all good sources of protein contain fat, and they're usually animal products, and the elderly have been scared to death with this coronary heart disease fear and cholesterol. They're the group that's really bought into this on a whole scale basis, and so they're a little bit more worried about their fat intake because they're near the end of life. So I think they're probably deficient in protein intake, and so if you make them sufficient in protein intake, they tend to gain lean body mass. Now, protein also it is a growth factor. There's no doubt about that. Protein, especially the branched chain amino acids, and especially leucine, will help maintain lean body mass during weight loss. And that's why I sometimes suggest that people take leucine as part of any kind of calorie-restricted diet, because that will really help them maintain their weight loss, because leucine is a particular amino acid that stimulates growth. Now, Don Layman, who's probably the guy that's done more work on protein than anybody else, says that you need about 8 milligrams a day of leucine to maintain lean body mass in the face of a caloric deficit, whether that caloric deficit is from a low-cal diet or a low-carb diet. You need about 8 milligrams a day of leucine, according to Layman. And since good quality animal protein contains about 8 to 10% leucine, that means you need about 90 or 100 grams a day to get the amount of leucine you need if you're on a calorically restricted diet. So, hang on for a minute. I've got all these things flitting across the bottom of the scene, of the screen, and I can't read it without my reading glasses. Okay. I was just informed by my coach over here that I said milligrams and not grams. You need 8 grams of leucine, and so you need 90 to 100 grams of protein a day to prevent lean body loss. Now, some people say that amino acids in general and leucine in particular stimulate a signaling molecule called mTOR, which is the mammalian target of rapamycin, which is a growth factor and actually has been shown to promote the growth of cancer. Now, it doesn't promote the initiation of cancer as far as I know, but it does promote the growth of cancer. So some of these people say, avoid protein, keep your protein to a minimal amount. Whatever you do, avoid leucine because you don't want to increase the growth of any cancers that you might have. And most of us are probably not going around with cancer, so I doubt that that's a real problem. I don't know that I would eat a lot of protein if I did have cancer, but I don't think you need to worry about it too much if you don't have cancer. But it definitely can't do that, that the mTOR can do that, and is a growth factor, a growth signaling molecule. Now, as I say, it could make the cancer grow if it's already there, but we're talking low-carb diets here in this talk this morning, and low-carb diets are a different animal than just the standard American diet or a westernized diet, or just to eat everything that's not red hot or nailed down diet that most people follow. And we're talking about a low-carb diet, and low-carb diets stimulate another signaling molecule called AMPK that's actually upstream from mTOR. So AMPK inhibits mTOR. So if you're on a low-carb diet, you've got a more active, a more stimulated AMPK, which inhibits the mTOR downstream, so it kind of negates the effect of the mTOR. And several studies have shown that that even ketosis inhibits mTOR. So if you're on a low-carb diet or a ketogenic diet, I really wouldn't worry a whole lot about this whole mTOR business. And I know there's some speakers out there that are saying, keep your protein to an absolute minimum. If you don't, you're going to you're going to get cancer next week, and you're going to shorten your lifespan. And I don't believe that's true, especially if you're following a low carb or a ketogenic diet. Now that we're talking about ketosis, let's talk about another aspect of protein that you've probably heard about. And a lot of people say that if you eat protein, you're going to run your blood glucose up. Let me see if these are questions. Okay, this is Wendy Shankin-Cohen just shared my video. Let them know I appreciate it. I do appreciate it. Barry Marlowe, love all this info. Glad you're enjoying it. A whole bunch of people are watching it right now, so that's great. Anyway, so does protein increase blood sugar? Well, not really. I mean, not if you take it orally and if you take it in the form of animal protein. I mean, studies from 1913 is the earliest one I could find, but from 1913 on, people have been giving people oral protein in varying amounts without ever finding a subsequent increase in blood sugar levels. In 1936, Newberg et al. Did a study where they gave people 1.5 pounds of meat at a sitting and saw no increase in blood sugar with 1.5 pounds of meat. And things are continuing to roll in. Great. Barry Marlowe shared. I appreciate it. Thanks. So 1.5 pounds of meat didn't cause an increase in blood sugar. So I doubt that it's really going to cause an increase in blood sugar if you eat protein, if 1.5 pounds of meat doesn't do it. Now, some reports are that it can take you out of ketosis, and ketosis is a little bit different animal if you're keto adapted, because a compound called oxaloacetate is one of the intermediates in the Krebs cycle, and oxaloacetate is shunted out of the Krebs cycle for gluconeogenic purposes. Oxaloacetate is a gluconeogenic precursor. In other words, it helps make sugar. I mean, it's a precursor to sugar. So when you don't take in any sugar and you're on a really low carbohydrate diet, the liver pillages your oxaloacetate to make sugar via gluconeogenesis, so the sugar can't keep on going in the Krebs cycle, or the oxaloacetate can't keep on going, and that's a trigger to form ketones. It's one of the triggers to form ketones. So by having not very much oxaloacetate, you're going to be forming ketones. Now, if you suddenly provide protein, which does provide oxaloacetate, one of a couple of things happens. One thing is that the protein itself, the dietary protein, can be used for gluconeogenesis, so it leaves the oxaloacetate alone, or the dietary protein can make more oxaloacetate. And if that happens, the stimulus to make ketones decreases. So there is some evidence that eating huge gobs of protein can take you out of ketosis, but it's a more individual thing. It doesn't seem to take me out of ketosis, but other people report that it does. So if you're concerned about that, what I would say is go ahead and try it yourself. Get a glucometer, which is what I did, and see if your blood sugar goes up if you're in ketosis, if you eat meat. And mine, it barely moved. Let's see what we get going on down here. Okay. So anyway, that's the story with ketones. There was a great study done in terms of what happens to blood sugar, really a definitive study done a few years ago in France, where the researchers took people and fed them eggs after a lead-in diet. They fed them nothing but eggs, and the eggs were interesting because the hens that produced the eggs were fed isotope-labeled food with both nitrogen and carbon, so that the hens laid eggs that had proteins in them that were labeled for both nitrogen and carbon. And so the researchers could figure out what happened to the protein in these eggs, what happened to the nitrogen part, and what happened to the carbon skeleton. And what ended up happening is that about 80% of the carbon skeleton was stripped of the nitrogen. So you had 80% carbon skeletons, which were gluconeogenic precursors, yet only a tiny, tiny amount, over 8 hours, only 4 grams of glucose was produced via gluconeogenesis from this pretty good wad of protein that these people took in dietarily. So that was the most definitive study I've ever seen, showing that really eating protein does not drive your glucose up. Now again, I don't know if 4 grams is going to be enough to take you out of ketosis or not, and I don't know if that would alter the levels of oxaloacetate enough to kick you out of ketosis. But it's as I say, your mileage may vary, so I would give it a try myself before I decided that it did or it didn't. So the important thing that you need to know about the protein thing and sugar is that it's a pull phenomenon. It's not a push phenomenon. In other words, if you eat a lot of protein, you're not going to push yourself to make sugar. But if you need sugar, you'll make it out of protein. And you can make anywhere from 50, 60 to 80 grams of glucose out of 100 grams of protein if you need to. So, but as I say, it's a pull phenomenon. If you need the glucose, you'll pull it from the protein, but taking the protein won't push you in to making glucose. And once again, one final thing, the ketosis is a separate subject. A lot of people that I think highly of seem to think that protein will take you out of ketosis. As I say, it doesn't take me out of ketosis, but it may other people. So anyway, that's about a wrap on the summary of everything I know about protein. Let's see, how much sugar is going to realize it knocks us out of ketosis? How long after a meal should we check our sugar? Check your sugar 45 minutes after a meal. It would have to go up a significant amount, I think, to knock you out of ketosis. I don't think going up from 80 milligrams to 90 milligrams is going to knock you out of ketosis. I mean, if you really want to check, get a ketone meter. It's the same meter. You use the same one for glucose. One of these, I can't remember the name of it, but you can get one that's really inexpensive, 15 or 16 or 18 bucks. That'll check both ketones and blood sugar. The blood sugar strips, the test strips, are really inexpensive. The ketone strips are not. They're probably $1 a piece. But if you wanted to, maybe more, a couple bucks a piece. But maybe if you want to really check and see what happens to ketosis, that's the thing to do. Spend a few bucks, get some of those strips, check your blood after a protein meal and see what happens to your ketones. See if they go down. Try a meal that's that's high fat, and like with really fatty cuts of meat, like ribeye caps, which I love, and see what that does, because the fat to protein ratio is a lot greater there than just a lean steak. And then try a lean steak about the same size and see what happens. And if it knocks you out of ketosis, you've got your answer. It didn't me. Let's see. Would you still wait 45 minutes after a meal with a ketone readings? That's a little longer process. I'd probably wait an hour and a half to check the ketones. I mean, that's just a wild guess on my part. I haven't even really thought about the timing of that. I mean, I check mine about an hour and a half after. But anyway, that's what I would look at. If anybody else knows better than I, feel free to chime in. You suggest 90 to 100 grams of protein. What amount would you recommend per pound of lean body mass to account for muscle mass differences? Oh, sort of the going rate for active people per pound of lean body mass is I think something like a gram per kilo. We like to bump ours a little bit, so we use like 0.6, 0.7 grams per pound of person. But if you reduce that to lean body mass, I would still say something like about a gram per kilo of lean body mass, if you can calculate your lean body mass in kilo. Waiting for other questions to roll through. Anybody's got anything, I'll be happy to answer them. Okay, that's about it. Well, I guess that is our discussion of protein. So I appreciate. Wow, wait a minute. Here's just another one that came in. Wait, look one question up. Oh, I can scroll through these. Is there a ratio of protein to fat for a 9-year-old type 1 diabetic that you would follow? Wow, that's kind of a horse of a different color, because type 1 diabetics can't really suppress the sugar that's made from protein, so they've got to account for the sugar made from protein. I would watch the protein carefully. Richard Bernstein says that I think, as I recall, that 8 grams of protein require about a unit of insulin to deal with. So since all the insulin in a type 1 diabetic is coming exogenously, you've got to account for that, and you don't have to account so much for the fat. So I would keep the fat to protein ratio pretty high. But even people with diabetes, even people with kidney disease, need an adequate amount of protein. So I would make sure that this child gets an adequate amount of protein. But more, obviously more fat for burning for energy, and a lot fewer carbs, and then you really only have to take out about a unit of insulin per the 8 grams. I mean, a physiological amount of insulin released every day is 30. Just on an average person, if you measure my insulin that's released, it's about 30. So the closer you can get a type 1 diabetic to 30 units of insulin or lower, the better off they're going to be, because it's a much more physiological dose. Let me see, now that I know I can scroll through these things. Okay, I guess that's it on the questions. Any last ones that came in? Elizabeth Miller just shared my video. Thanks, Liz. Good to know you're on here. Okay, if your body's utilizing ketones, which we want, wouldn't our ketone readings always be lower? Nah, because you're using them, but you got all these ketones in the blood that you're constantly producing, and at the same time you're using them out of the blood. So it's kind of a steady state. You've got more coming in and you've got some going out, so your levels stay about the same. they just get suppressed if something like a big wad of glucose, for example, shuts down the ketogenic process. Then you're not putting more ketones in, your body's continuing to lose them, so the level in the blood will drop. Okay, Lifestyle als medicine. Lifestyle is medicine, just shared. Thank you very much, Linda Clark. Thank you for hanging in there. And I will sign off. My time is about run out. So I appreciate everybody for coming today and watching this. And take care. Eat an adequate amount of protein. Restrict your carbs and live a long, healthy life. Take care. Adios.